Good morning, everyone. Hope you're all having a wonderful day today. Today, we're going to be talking about the Vortex AMG UH-1 Gen II, also lovingly referred to as the Huey due to its nice boxy shape. But before we get into that, we do, of course, need to thank Gun Deals for having us on the channel. Gun Deals, if you don't know, is a website that compiles some of the best deals within the industry. So whatever it is that you're looking for, you can probably find a link to it on their website for the best possible price. They don't buy or sell anything, they only point you in the right direction. So if you're interested in saving money on cool stuff like the Vortex AMG UH-1 Gen II, lovingly referred to as the Huey, go ahead and check them out. So other than that, of course, like, share, and subscribe while you're here. And with all that out of the way, go ahead and comment something nice about this thick, boxy boy down below. Now, with all of that out of the way, we paid our own money for this optic. I believe we picked it up from Bowtac for $540, I believe. Usually the MSRP is like $800, $900, something like that. But street part price is around $600 usually, and a little bit less than that on sale. Now, you might be thinking that's very expensive for a red dot, but this is, of course, a holographic style optic like the Eotechs. Now, when you compare it to Eotechs, especially the Eotech XPS3s and EXPS3s, it is very appropriately priced and very competitively priced with those optics. Now, getting into some features and specifics on the AMG UH-1 Gen II, this one here is, of course, the Gen 2 version, which has some minor improvements over the original Gen, well, and some major improvements as well. We have a little bit different design of an optic body, a little bit more material removed, a little bit lighter, a little bit better emitter situation, and a few other improvements as well. Now, when it comes to size and weight, we have an optic that's about 4 inches long, about 3 inches tall. The center line on the reticle itself is 1.63 for a lower 1/3 co-witness out of the box, which is actually quite nice. It's at a very, very comfortable height. Now, in terms of size, it is definitely large for a red dot. But again, when we compare it to Eotechs like the 558 or 512, it's a little bit smaller than those, but a little bit larger than the EXPS and XPS series. Now, I tried to find specifically what the material was, whether it was 6061 or 7075, but because I couldn't find the specifics, I'm going to assume it is 6061, which is a little bit cheaper, a little bit easier to machine, of course, a little bit less strong. Though again, when we're talking about, even this is a big optic, but smaller, compact optics like this with a very thick aluminum hull, they are very, very tanky optics. Weight is 11.6 ounces, which again, for its size, is not that bad, though it is quite a bit larger than a lot of your micro-style red dots. Now, externally on the Huey Gen 2, we do, of course, have our windage and elevation, which are built into the optic body itself. They are not capped in any way, but personally I like that because they are still very easy to access if you need to, but they're recessed into the body, so you're not going to be accidentally knocking them. Now, everything is O-ring sealed on this optic. We do have IPX8 certification, which I believe is like 10 meters for 30 minutes or an hour or something like that. So if you want to go diving or something with this optic, you can totally do that. Now, moving to the back, we have very simple buttons for adjustments. We, of course, have up, down, and of course our night vision settings. This does come with 15 different brightness settings. 4 of those are night vision. At this time, I have not tried out any of the night vision settings. Now, moving over to the other side, we have a very slick battery compartment. This is powered by a singular CR123A battery, and there's actually a little lever on here that allows you to very easily adjust it. You just flip out this little lever and then you can pull it out, and of course it's also captured as well by a little wire. We have a single CR123A that came with a Panasonic battery, totally fine. They're probably a Duracell will be a little bit better, but as far as the batteries go, just make sure you're getting something that works for your environment. And of course, once you get it nice and sealed back up, you can just flip that lever down and then it's very nice and compact. Now, of course, we also have an external QD lever, which is very robust, and on this gun, very tight. which allows us to take it on and off quickly. Now, the body is again aluminum. I believe it's 6061. If it was 7075, I believe that would be more of a selling point and they would be putting that on their website. Though again, I tried to find what the exact material makeup was and I couldn't find it on their website, in the product manual, or in other reviews as well. So I do believe it is 6061. It is finished in a very nice matte anodization. However, something I do note about the finish itself is that it's pretty weak and pretty thin, so it will come off. I had it set up in a tree just for some B-roll, and I noticed the finish had just started to come off just like rubbing up against the wood. So the finish might be a bit weak, but for me it's not really a big deal. It's just an aesthetics thing if you really care about it. Now, the meat and potatoes about this optic is that it is a true holographic style optic like the Eotechs. Does have some advantages. The main advantage to that is basically a perfectly parallax-free red dot. Almost all red dots on the market will have some shift in impact if you have your head in the wrong position. Most of them are fairly minimal, like something under 2 inches or so. However, with these holographic style of optics, I believe the Eotechs have actually been tested at 0 parallax, which means that as long as you can get your head behind the very, very generous size of glass, wherever you put that dot is exactly where that bullet's going to go. So, now on top of that, with the Huey Gen 2, it also comes with their Cqb style reticle, which gives you a very, very fine 1 MOA dot aiming point that is very crisp, very easy to use, especially when you're using a 3x magnifier or 4x magnifier or so on and so forth. So personally, I prefer holographics, especially when you're combining them with a magnifier. They tend to be a lot more crisp and a lot more sharp versus like a regular red dot LED emitter, which when you get it under magnification, the dots can start to look a little bit funky and not quite so perfect. But the reticle on the Huey Gen 2 is very nice, very crisp. It kind of does the Eotech donut of death, though not quite. It does have a hold for 10 yards and in, so you have a built-in height over bore if you're shooting very close range at very small targets, or you want to make sure that bullet goes exactly where you want it to. You do have a hold for close range. On top of that, the inner part of their donut of death is still 65 MOA, or the average dude's height at 100 yards. So that means obviously if they fill up the entire reticle, 100 yards, if they fill up half the reticle, 200 yards, so on and so forth. So it's sort of a built-in ranging feature. Now, another byproduct of having that outer sort of donut of death like an Eotech is that for me anyways, it really helps me to pick up that center dot and get it onto target very, very quickly. If I'm shooting at closer targets, trying to move as fast as I can, say in like a competition or a 3-gun like that, when I'm up close, I don't need to worry about even where that center dot is. I can just put that reticle on the target inside of say 5, 10, 15 yards, and I know I'm going to be putting hits where I want them. So not only is it a very fast reticle with a built-in Cqb hold and of course auto ranging features in the reticle itself, it's also very crisp and very precise if you wanted to take longer range shots with a magnifier. Now I have taken this optic out to 400 yards with a magnifier just using Kentucky windage holding up above the target and using a very crisp 1 MOA dot. It's a lot easier than if you have say another cheaper red dot where it's blooming out or that dot's like oblong, so you're kind of just holding that dot somewhere above the target. But again, with these holographic style reticles, they are very, very crisp, so it's kind of the best of both worlds. Now, some people, when they look at these for the first time, they'll say, oh, well, they look a little bit fuzzy. And that is true. They do look a little bit fuzzy if you stare directly at the reticle. However, what you're supposed to be doing is just looking at the target and then transposing that dot onto the target versus actually staring at the dot itself. So there are some cons to them. Some people don't like the look of holographic style reticles. Personally, I do think they have an advantage. I do think they're a little bit faster, and especially with the emitter technology that's going into them, they're kind of the best of both worlds, except when we talk about battery life. Now, again, the battery life is not really listed on their website. From what I've heard, it's anywhere between 1,000 and 5,000 hours, depending on battery and settings that you're using. Something that I should mention is that this does get extremely bright, brighter than you will ever need in whatever scenario you could think of. It does get extremely fire bright, hard to look at sort of bright. And then of course on top of that it also has, 15 different brightness settings, 4 of which are night vision. Currently, short battery life just is a downside of these holographic style optics, and while it is a downside and you do need to be aware for it for the intended application of like police, military, that sort of thing, I think it does make a lot of sense, because you're not necessarily concerned with battery life. You turn it on when you need it, when you know that you're going to be doing something. For that sort of rule, it makes a lot of sense. Maybe for a home defense scenario, it doesn't make that much sense, because you don't want to check the battery every day to make sure that it still has enough charge when you wake up in the middle of the night. But for competition, for military, law enforcement, that sort of thing, when you know that you're going to be doing something for a set amount of time, they can be very, very good, because again, in my opinion, they are still the fastest sighting system, especially something like the Huey, which we'll talk about in just a minute. We have a huge chunk of very, very good glass that you're looking through, and personally, that is something that I like. Now, of course, we do have a window that is, I believe, 1 inch tall and then 1.25 inches wide, which is a very, very large viewing experience. Slightly larger than your standard Eotechs. I haven't looked through all the Eotechs, but definitely slightly larger than your standard Eotechs, because this does not have a hood around it. It is an actual aluminum hole that is holding your glass versus an aluminum hole around the aluminum hole that is holding your glass. So this might be a little bit more ultimately strong, though I don't have any doubts about the Vortex's durability. Now, the glass itself is very good. It's very crisp, it's very clear. There is zero distortion. Sometimes with certain red dots, you'll hold it up and there'll be like a little bit of warp or wobble if you move it around in front of your eye. This glass is perfectly clear, perfectly flat, perhaps a little bit of blue tint versus an Eotech, so maybe there's a little bit of tint there, but in terms of its crispness, clarity, light transmission is basically perfect. On top of that, you have a huge viewing window, which if you're like me, I know it's not a big deal, because of course you're shooting with both eyes open, so you have 180 degrees field of view, or around thereabouts. But for me personally, a big optic window is more fun and a little bit easier to shoot with. Again, that's a personal preference thing. I'm not saying that, of course, you can't shoot just as fast with an Aimpoint T2, but personally, having a bigger window helps me out. And it probably also helps out with the light transmission, because, of course, these are also designed to be very capable with night vision devices. Now, one knock that I will say on the Huey Gen 2, or specifically a lot of Vortex's red dots have this issue, their LED-based emitters and also on the Huey, is the refresh rate, which is the amount of times per second that that image is refreshed on the glass, is just a little bit lower than on some of the other options on the market. And what that means is if you move it really fast, it does not look like a solid continuous laser beam. You can see how it is refreshing so often every second. Now, when I'm actually shooting it outdoors, I never noticed it whatsoever. In the 500 or 600 rounds that I've been testing this over the last couple weeks, I have not noticed that in shooting whatsoever. That is only something that you're going to notice if you're playing around and doing this sort of thing inside. When it's actually mounted to a gun, even if you're transitioning very, very quickly, you're never going to notice that. Now, something that we briefly mentioned earlier is actually the QD mount itself, and this is actually very well designed. So we have a QD lever that, of course, locks down. Now, importantly, the QD lever itself is actually locked in place via a detent that is spring-loaded, that you need to press out of the way, and then you can unlock the optic. So while you have this on your gun, this isn't accidentally going to work its way free, because of course it cannot work its way free. There's another button that you need to depress, and then you can actually un-QD it from your rifle. So the way to adjust the tightness is on the opposite side here. We have a very nice squared off cross bolt, which will increase the contact surface between your upper receiver and your optic. And that will, of course, help to provide a rock solid zero. Now, in our testing with DI AR-15s in 5.56, we never experienced any issues with that sort of thing. to tighten the actual QD method for different rails, because of course different upper receivers can have a little bit of different tolerances on the Picatinny rails. You just use a flathead screwdriver or a case ram or something to torque down the steel nut on the backside of the crossbolt, and that will of course adjust the tension to your specific rail. In terms of its overall mounting system, you have a ton of contact surface on this side, and then the actual locking block on the other side is fairly small, though it's very similar to like how Eotech holographics mount up, and those are also well regarded for having a rock solid lockup to your rail. So overall, for the feature set that you're getting with this optic for, let's say, $600, it is very competitive with Eotech's. It is made in the USA, though I believe the reticle emitter system is made in the UK. So for a 99% made in the USA optic, $600, great glass, night vision settings if you need that sort of thing, or if you're into competition and you want one of the best 1x optics on the market, this will absolutely do that. And of course, if you're not just into competition, if you're in, you know, some sort of serious application, military, law enforcement, civilian, you know, anything like that, it has a lot of features built for that sort of hard use. It is a very tanky construction. It is a little big, it is a little heavy, but with that size and weight, you are of course getting a rock solid optic. Now, something that I haven't mentioned yet is they actually have a anti-reflection coating on the front pane of glass. So right now the reticle is on. It is more than bright enough for the current circumstances. And when looking at this optic from the front, there is absolutely no visible red hue. Sometimes with red dots and other holographics, even Eotech, sometimes when you're looking at it from the front, you can see a little bit of a red hue or a red glare, which could, in theory, give away your position in a dark environment. However, with the anti-reflective coatings on the front of the glass, there is absolutely no visible light coming from the front of the optic whatsoever. So overall, I don't think that the Vortex AMG UH-1 Gen II, lovingly referred to as the Huey, is the right optic for everyone, because it is going to be a little bit more specific. If you have a specific application for it, you're not worried about the battery dying on you, because it's not necessarily something like a home defense or a truck gun or something where you're not necessarily checking it every single day to make sure that that battery is at a proper level. If it's something that you just want to set and forget, you're probably going to be going with an LED emitter. But for dedicated hard use applications, for competition, something like that, this is an excellent top tier red dot near the top of the stack. And for me personally, is at least on par with similar offerings from Eotech. I believe I paid like $475 for this on a Black Friday, and this one here $540. So in terms of price, normally these would be very, very close to each other. And this is again a 558, which I personally like. It gives you the lower 1/3 QD, night vision settings, but AA batteries, which gives you 2,500 hours of battery life, which is 2.5 times what a EXPS or XPS will give you. So I like that about the 558. But overall, the UH1 is a worthy optic if you're looking in that same price category and size and weight category as an Eotech. It is definitely something to look at. If you have a buddy who has one, I would definitely try and look through one, get a feel for it, see if that's something that you would like. But again, it is still going to be a very, very good option. If you pick this up over an Eotech or pick an Eotech over this, I think you're going to be very happy either way. So with all of that out of the way, guys, I hope you all enjoyed. Let me know what you guys think of the AMG UH-1 down in the description down below, and I will see you guys in the next one. Peace off.